Hello, everyone. Good morning. What a joy and an honor it is to be here with you today. My name is Liz Loeb. I use she and her pronouns, and I'm recording this on Dakota land at my home in Northeast Minneapolis, where I live with my spouse, Sarah, and our dog, Chloe. I am a longtime friend, collaborator, and co-conspirator with the Lindale community. And I am also the Associate Director at Minnesota Interfaith Power and Light, an organization that works with communities of faith, spiritual practice, and conscience, nationally and statewide, to take powerful action at the intersection of climate justice and racial justice. I am also a member of the board of directors. Oi, my grandmother of blessed memory would be so proud, at Shir Tikva Synagogue, which is located on Dakota land in South Minneapolis. As a queer person and as a Jewish person, it means so much to me that Christian congregations like Lindale exist, because it means that I get to be in friendship and in movement building and community, knowing that my queer and LGBT beloveds have a place to practice their Christian faith where they are embraced as holy and as whole. As a white Jew in diaspora, I am grateful to be in relationship with a Christian congregation like Lindale that has committed itself to undoing Christian supremacy, to naming and resisting anti-Semitism and white nationalism, and to showing up towards justice and collective liberation in the world. Thank you, each of you, my friends and community members, for all that you do and for all that you make possible. It is so good to be here with you today. So a few weeks ago, at the very end of July on a Friday morning, I woke up to a hazy sunrise that more or less resembled the Eye of Sauron from The Lord of the Rings. And for folks who don't know what that is, my apologies. And I know this is not maybe the most traditional way to start a sermon, but Sauron is The Lord of the Rings is well, let's start with The Lord of the Rings. The Lord of the Rings is a British post-World War I work of world-building fantasy by J.R.R. Tolkien. Sauron is the big, bad, malevolent force of evil in the books, in The Lord of the Rings, this set of books, this work of literature. And Sauron, this big, bad, malevolent force of evil, is described as watching over the realm of Mordor with a big, fiery eye from top of a burning mountain in this place called Middle Earth. And Mordor, ruled over by Sauron, is a devastated wasteland filled with orcs and burning pits and giant spiders that fills pretty much everyone who enters with something between a gnawing to acute sense of overwhelming existential dread and misery. So, like I said, I woke up on this Friday morning and not just the sun, but the entire landscape looked like the Eye of Sauron. Not the best way to greet the day. And fear not, this will not be a sermon about the Lord of the Rings, although I would love to write that sermon someday. So I had slept fitfully the night before because I had stayed up too late in bed doom scrolling, so much doom scrolling, about the newly emerging discouraging news about the Delta variant. And I had been reading about the vaguely apocalyptic and convincingly unprecedented air quality alert for the Twin Cities that had been issued the day before. It felt like everything was happening at once. Fires, drought, Delta, like we had barely been able to start imagining the green and tender sprouts of a moment when the world might settle into something like what we thought we knew, and poof, it was gone again. So I did what any self-respecting, urban dwelling, 42-year-old queer would do. I texted my friends to ask what is going on. WTF. Thank goodness for friends who text, because it was on that text loop that one of my dearest people, who also happens to be a rabbi, reminded me that the word for soul or spirit and the word for breath are one and the same in Hebrew. So the word for spirit and the word for breath, they're the same word in Hebrew, and that word is ruach. In Hebrew, ruach, the breath of Adonai, the most holy, and the physical breath of our being, the breath of our bodies, are one and the same. It's what we knew viscerally and instinctively when Eric Gardner and George Floyd and so many beloved others who have been murdered by police and by anti-Blackness and by white supremacy have cried out, "I can't breathe." It's why the weight and the truth of those words resonate in our bodies and in our actions and in our most intimate places. It's also why I believe, no matter how overwhelming things seem, we always have a path together towards something more connected, more true, more possible, and more free. So let me explain. We breathe in and we breathe out. It's how we stay alive. In and then out. Sometimes consciously, sometimes without knowing it's happening at all. You can try it with me right now if you would like to. Inhale. Exhale. Inhale. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold. 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. One more time. Inhale. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold. 2, 3, 4. Exhale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Notice how you feel. Notice your body. Notice where you feel big, where you feel tight, where you feel heavy, where you feel light. Oh, my friends, we contain multitudes. More than one sensation, more than one experience happening all the time in our very beings. And more than that, when we inhale, we take fresh oxygen, an element created by the stars and the universe and the cosmos in a flash of energy and combustion and creation until light became heat, became gas, and our atmosphere formed, and the atmosphere formed, and the rocks formed, and the life we know found its way from all that is. We take oxygen from the world outside into our membranes, into our lungs, and we exhale it as a new arrangement of molecules, carbon dioxide. And then those molecules release and rearrange and bond to new elements and new patterns, and life continues. We breathe in and we breathe out. We eat and we drink and we poop. And in all of that, by some force of transformation that we name into being as organs and blood and bones, we are factually and chemically made of one another's molecules. We are creating the building blocks of one another's chemical existence with every breath. That strikes me as an amazing thing, because it means no matter what feels hard and no matter what feels true, the only more true thing is that we are made of one another. And all of our heartbreak and all of our beauty, we are made of one another at a cellular level, and of the stars and the cosmos and the combustion and the millions of years before. We are made of all beings and of one another and of all life. We can be terrible and we can be glorious, but whatever we are not alone. At our very core, the foundation of our being, we are part of the sky and the trees and the wind, and we are part of one another. And I believe, some days because I choose to believe it, and some days because it feels like the only thing that makes sense in the whole wide world, that this truth, this truer than true thing of our connection, will lead us on the path home, no matter how far we've traveled and no matter how far we have to go. Take, for example, water. H2O, 3 atoms, 2 hydrogen and 1 oxygen, bonded together through some magic of the stars that lives in the dirt and the skies and in our bones, all these things I'm talking about that, everyone, we should go study quantum physics. We'll get to that later, I promise. But this amazing thing happens where elements can they attach to another, the electrons mix, the particles rearrange, and we go from separate things to things that are part of one another and something different altogether. So 2 hydrogen atoms and 1 oxygen atom become water. The molecules of ruach, spirit and breath, oxygen, find hydrogen and together they make water. The rivers and the oceans and the streams and the rain, they are made from the same protons and electrons that animate our blood and charge our hearts. When indigenous water protectors say MNIPL, water is life in Lakota, they are not simply reminding us of the fact that we physically die without water. They are reminding us that life is made of the relationships that make that fact of water possible. No one element can sustain life on its own. Without water, our cells cannot hold or pump or support or flow, and no amount of oxygen will matter unless it also becomes water in our bodies. The magic happens in the compound, in the electrostatic bonding that marks our interconnection, that makes our interconnection so irreducibly material. Oxygen meets hydrogen. Water meets breath. Spirit meets life. We are not alone, even if we wanted to be, even if we tried. What then to do with this knowing? Just this past week, my spouse Sarah and I had plans to go to the Boundary Waters, my favorite place. But the Boundary Waters were on fire and our permits were canceled. After months of drought, the waters became too low and the ground became too dry and the earth became too hot. Fires sparked and lit more fires, and wind carried the smoke for miles. Water, air, fire, earth. Our friend Sophia welcomed us into her small farmhouse on a lake in Wright, Minnesota, but we couldn't go outside because the air wasn't safe to breathe. I paced around Sophia's dining room, thwarted and grumpy and cranky, and three things occurred to me. One, the Buddhists are right about almost everything. Control is an illusion that leads to the violence of separation and domination. Trying to control people and beings and fires and the boundary waters and circumstances leads to suffering, and we should probably find a way to be at peace with the gifts of the present moment. Grrr. Two, just because Buddhists are maybe right about almost everything, it absolutely doesn't mean that we shouldn't try to take collective action towards shared liberation and a more lifeful world. See, for example, my poetic waxing about how our interconnection, maybe probably, or yes, definitely, means that the earth is a complex system and that all complex systems have the ability to heal themselves, and that working together, we can be part of a planet grounded in balance and interdependence and love, right? Right? Okay, but three, even with all of that, colonial white supremacy and environmental degradation are intertwined as globalized systems of exploitation and extraction. And so things are probably going to get worse for a while. I figure if that's so, I have two choices: to try to gather whatever scraps of privilege and protection I can find around me and hoard my resources and double down on whiteness and wealth and on the fantasy that either of those things could ever protect me, and hope that while things might get bad, they might not be that bad for me and my family. So that's one choice. I think the other way to go is that I remember that we are made of one another's molecules and that what happens to you happens to me. And so I spend the time I have doing the best I can to be part of the healing and collective action we need in order to find some other way from here to there. Sigh, sigh. And once again, I say, grrr. So easy to say, less easy to do. All week, as I've been thinking about writing this sermon, I've been remembering a story from Hebrew school. Every year before Passover, we would listen to the story of how Moses was saved from the Egyptians when his mother, Jochebed, placed him in a basket of reeds in the flowing Nile River. Of course, the story says Moses was found and he grew up, and there was a burning bush and a parting of the seas and something on a mountain and a whole lot of very big dramatic things that come afterwards. But at the very beginning, there was a parent and an infant and a basket in the river. And in the way the story was told in my Hebrew school, the river mattered. The river sheltered Moses and kept him hidden and safe. When Jochebed faced certain death for her child, she trusted the river with the being she loved most in the world. Jochebed was enslaved, bonded to forced labor with her children bonded to forced labor with her children held as property. And still she knew that the river was there, that she could make her way to the banks quietly, secretly, and give the river her child to hold as its own. She did not know whether the waters would remain calm, whether the basket would float, whether her child would be found. She did not know whether he would survive or whether their people would ever be free. Every time we were told that story, after Jochebed had left Moses in his basket, not knowing if anything would be okay or what might happen next, we would sing as loudly as we could with all of our breath, Mayim, 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 Mayim biason. Mayim, 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 hey, Mayim biason, which means water, 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 water in joy. Water, 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 hey, water in joy. Ruach and water, mini wichani. Water is life. To what river banks will I go with my hope and my grief and my not knowing? To what stream or creek shall I call towards joy? To which waters would I give the love I hold most dear? I live 2 blocks from the Mississippi River, Mississippi, great river in Anishinaabe. I walk my dog by the river. I watch its seasons and its moods. I let its currents soothe and soften me. Some days it feels like the entire world. Some days it's just scenery as I rush from thing to thing. We do not get to know what comes next. We do not get to know if the fires will stop, if the air will clear, if Moses will be found, if it will ever all be okay. It probably won't ever all be okay, but it will change because life is change. And in the words of Octavia Butler, and in agreement, once again, I think with many, many Buddhists, God is change. And we are made from the soil and the sky and from one another. And we have a responsibility to life and to each other and to my dog who's barking in the background and to this planet, no matter how grumpy we might feel about it on any given day. There is nothing wrong with feeling despair. There is nothing wrong with feeling indifference or fear or boredom or anger or frustration or none of these things or all of those things or anything else at all, anytime at all. But our actions, our sacred, whispering, magnificent actions, ordinary, small, big. I think our actions matter no matter what they are and no matter how we start. And if you want specifics about actions, hi, I'm the director of a climate justice organization. Ask Ashley for my email, and I have some ideas about where to start, and I would love to talk to you about it. Side note. Ursula Le Guin once wrote, "We live in capitalism. Its power seems inescapable. So did the divine right of kings. Any human power can be resisted and changed by human beings. So that means white supremacy too, and the building of oil pipelines and the dumping of plastics and the extraction of fossil fuels. Oxygen and hydrogen bonded together, creating the possibility of life. We are born from connection itself. Find a river. Let the water hold what you love most, even when, especially when, you don't know how the waters will flow." Thank you.